Baby shark, baby shark, baby shark, baby shark, mommy shark, mommy shark, mommy shark, mommy shark, daddy shark.
Is that Mike's theme song?
Yeah.
It is. It's my walk-up song.
That's your walk-up.
Yeah, we're going to have to get rid of that, Mike. Still brings bad memories over here.
Gotta find a song with Fed in it.
Can you do a Allen song?
Is there a song called Fed Up? That would be for Mike. That would be a great shirt for him for the holidays. Fed Up. So, thank you for joining us, Mike. We appreciate that. Great new article yesterday, right? That you posted?
Yesterday. Yep. Yes.
It's the Fed Gaslighting. You had all kinds of great stuff in there. And you mentioned something about integrity, which is sort of weird when you put that in with the Fed.
Or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof. So give us your assessment of the minutes. What are your thoughts? It seems like the Fed is scrambling around to try to figure out what this new policy is. What is your assessment of the whole thing?
The Fed, I think, is getting desperate. The Fed knows that their actions really have very little effect. And that's even more so today than it's been because rates are so low. The lower rates get, there's just less need or desire to borrow money, right? We've had so many chances at lower rates that the marginal benefits of lower rates is next to nothing, right? We've had zero rates for the last decade, give or take the last few years. Mm-hmm. So the benefit of lowering rates is minimal. We've seen a boost to the housing market and the auto market, but the benefit is, there is some benefit, but it only lasts for so long, and the Fed knows that, right? And QE, other than propping up the stock market and asset prices, has almost zero effect on the economy. The whole concept of trickle down is a joke, and that's been proven now for 40 years. So what can the Fed do? They can try to talk things up, right? And they certainly are good at that. That's gaslighting, essentially, right?
That's right.
It's creating a false narrative with false logic to try to get the people to believe something. But what I think they really want to do, and I think one of the purposes of QE is to allow the government to run these deficits that are unheard of, right? And in 2008, 2009, Obama ran a deficit in the, just under $2 trillion, and we all thought that was crazy. Now we're running something almost double that. And, this is totally unsustainable except for the Fed. The Fed buys this debt. They keep interest rates abnormally low, not just for U.S. Treasuries, but for pretty much any half-decent borrower. And they keep it's not that they're keeping the economy and the recovery going. They're keeping the whole economy from collapsing because interest rates, the pressure is that interest rates need to rise. That's really what should be happening. But the Fed is pretty much buying all the treasuries out there. And now they're running into a problem. And they keep begging. If you listen to every Fed speech over the last 3 or 4 weeks, including Jerome Powell at the last meeting, they're begging for Congress to come to an agreement on stimulus.
Yep. He keeps throwing that in there. Yep.
They're literally begging. You got to do it. Dire consequences if you don't do it. We got to do it. We got to do it. We got to do it. And there's a couple reasons he's saying that. A, because he knows that fiscal stimulus will help prop up the economy. It's propping it up in a weird way. I heard you guys talk about the K-shaped recovery. It's helping some, hurting others. But, they're looking at overall appearances, and GDP looks good, and inflation is rising. So they think it's good for everyone, where it's clearly not good for everyone. But they can't do QE if there aren't bonds to buy. And at the pace they're going, if we got back to our old deficit of only $1 trillion, or slightly less than $1 trillion or slightly more, there aren't enough bonds for them to buy to do what they want to do. So they need the Treasury to continue issuing $2 to $4 trillion of, a deficit, to fund a deficit so that they can issue their debt, so that they can buy the bonds.
So it seems like a spiral down that we can't. I mean, to your point, the Fed can grease an engine, but they can't totally repair it, right? So they only have a couple of guns and they're fighting Godzilla. So I think it's great how you tie in what they're really trying to do even on the fiscal side. And yeah, it's almost like Powell is begging, if you don't do this fiscal stimulus. I've never really heard this from a Fed official as of late. I mean, they bring it up, we don't do this and it would be great. But he is pressing hard on the fiscal stimulus.
So, Mike, these are the unintended consequences of a decade of bad moves by the Fed, because we had opportunities to raise rates previously, and now we're stuck in a position where, I mean, you can't raise rates right now, and yet, so now you have to keep printing.
Honestly, Danny, it's about 30 years of bad Fed policy.
Yeah, true.
What happened 10 years ago is when rates hit zero. So they used to just adjust interest rates up and down. And, I mean, I remember taking out my first mortgage, which was at 7 or 8%. And then rates got lowered to 6%. And I got to refi. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. I got an extra $50 every month to spend. And that worked till we got to 2008 when rates got to zero. Interest rate, U.S. Treasury, short-term rates got to zero. Mortgage rates got down to, I don't remember where, 4.5%. Again, everyone got the gift from the Fed. But at that point, that's when the game ended. They couldn't lower rates anymore unless they wanted negative rates, which we have seen in Europe and Japan. So they'd go to QE. And QE is not a very effective tool. It's an effective tool to keep interest rates where they're at or slightly lower, but it's not an effective tool for the economy. And, again, back to the K-shape, because that's a big deal. Why are we seeing some of this social unrest? I think this goes well beyond police actions. I think this is economic, right?
Yep.
And it's not just poor people. It's not just poor people in the slums. This is the middle class that is getting killed. And the percentage of the population that is on the other side of the Fed trade is growing rapidly, because most of us don't own stocks. And those that, and for those of us that do own stocks, for a lot of us, it's just in our 401ks, which we can't touch till we retire. So the percentage of people that really own stocks in any kind of meaningful quantity that can use that wealth today is really small. And they tend to keep it in their portfolios. They don't withdraw to spend it. So the wealth effect of a rising stock market is not that effective. And that's what the Fed's doing. They're keeping zombie companies in business. And you look on the fiscal side, the big debate now is, do we bail out the airlines or do we bail out the municipalities, or both? That's how you end up with this K-shaped economy. If they bail out the airlines, again, they're on the upper side of the K, and the munis are on the lower side of the K. Both munis and airlines hire people. They both have employees. It's, it becomes politics at this point, and it's, this is the ugly side of stimulus, is that the government decides who the winners are and who the losers are. And the Fed, even though they're not elected officials, have taken on that same role. And, it's honestly sickening, and I wish I didn't have to write or talk as much about the Fed, because what we should be doing much more is talking about stocks and finding companies that are cheap and selling companies that are expensive, and not having to deal with markets that are totally dependent on the Fed. I feel like I come on your show, I'm like the weather guy. And it's Mike Lebowitz on the 8th to talk about what the Fed just did.
But it drives, to your point, the Fed drives asset prices first and foremost. So it is very important, and we need to look at that as well. When we get back on The Real Investment Show, more with Mike Lebowitz this morning on 700 KCV, the voice of Texas. Don't go away.
Real Investment Advice blog. It's required reading for the informed investor. Catch it today at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Who will win the election in November? How will that decision affect your decisions for your retirement? Richard Rosso and Danny Ratliff's next Candid Coffee can answer your questions about money, retirement, risk management, and how to identify and protect your household against financial vulnerability, regardless of who's elected. Send your questions and join this live go-to-webinar event at realinvestmentadvice.com. Candid Coffee with Ratliff and Rosso at realinvestmentadvice.com.